In this video, we're going to review Project 12, where you designed a stock class in Java. You're given a driver class to start off with, so I've already downloaded that, I've created a project, and then what we need to do is create this stock class that has these fields and these methods. So what I like to do is take the description of the fields that are required and actually copy those into my project class. So I'm going to make a new class. I'm going to call it stock, and it's in my projects folder. It doesn't need a main method because the driver will serve as the main method for this project. And here's my class. And then I'm going to paste this list of fields to help me remember what fields are actually needed. So we have these 5 fields. The company's name is going to be a string. I think that's the clearest thing for that. The stock symbol will be a string. The previous and current closing prices, that's going to be a double. Again, doubles are not the best way to handle money, but they are a close enough approximation for our purposes here. And then the number of shares would be an integer. So the company's name is a string. I would call this company name. The stock symbol is a string. And then closing price, previous close. And then finally, some number of shares. So going back to the project description, we need to have a constructor and getters and setters which are appropriate. Now there's something about this set closing price. We'll come back to that in a moment. So to make a constructor, we'll go to source, constructor using fields. Now realistically, the stock isn't going to have an initial closing and previous close price. When we actually create a stock object, those are going to just be 0. So I don't need to have parameters for those. The parameters will be the company name, stock symbol, and then the number of shares. So I'll generate that. Notice it already sets the values for company name, stock symbol, number of shares, and then I need to say that the closing price is 0.0, and I'll be consistent and I'll say this. Even though in this case, since I don't have another closing price variable defined or parameter defined, I don't strictly need it, but it kind of makes it fit in with everything else. And so here is the previous closing price. It'll be set to 0. Now, when I run this with the test code, maybe I'll need to add another constructor, but I think this is a reasonable constructor to start off with. The next thing I need to do is add the getters and setters. I will use Eclipse to do that for me as well, because getters and setters are pretty straightforward. So the closing price, I'm going to want a getter and a setter for. The previous closing price, I want to get that, but I don't want to ever set that, because actually I'm going to modify the previous closing price inside the set closing price, because when I set a new closing price, that old closing price becomes the new previous price. So I think just a getter is sufficient there. The number of shares, it actually can change, but you're not going to just set that number. There will be a different behavior we would want to add. So I'm going to just use a getter for the number of shares. The company name, it doesn't change very much. So I guess the question is, if the company changes its name, do we want to create a new object for it, or do we want to let the company name change? And I think it's better just to say we're going to keep the company name the same and not allow that to be changed, at least with a setter. And then the stock symbol, again, we're just going to set it, not get it. So we've decided that closing price can be updated. All of the rest, you only have a getter or an accessor method. We're not going to allow those to be changed with these getter and setter methods. So we'll generate those, and you can see those are all there. Now, when we set the closing price, before we update the closing price field, we need to say the previous closing price is equal to the closing price. And again, we need to use this to differentiate this field from this parameter that have the same name. This sets the previous closing price to whatever the old one was, and then we update the closing price with the new value. And I think this meets the requirements of the getters and setters, and the setter method for set closing price should update the closing price with the current closing price. So now we need to write some methods. And again, I'm just going to copy this into my code as a comment. I'll reformat that a little bit just to make it easier to see. Let's actually test our code. So we do have a driver that we can see there's some stuff it doesn't like. And it looks like we are expecting there to be a constructor that has all the fields in it. Even though maybe we could argue this isn't ideal design, since we already know how the constructor is going to be used, we need to include that in our method. So we'll do a constructor using fields. That had everything. We generate it. And now, if we save this file and go back over to here, you can see that that error has gone away because I have a constructor that matches this given set of values. Now notice in the constructor, we actually create an array of these stocks, and that just makes things a little easier for us. And it's always good to test your code as you go. So our code doesn't really do anything yet, but I think if we say that we're going to take these methods and comment them out, except for the print method, which we'll implement that next. Because everything else works, it looks like the constructor is good, so let's write a print method for our stock class. And so it says here in the directions that the print method should display the stock symbol and the current and previous closing prices. I'll actually make this the comment for my method. So that's going to be a public method. I want anybody to be able to call it. It's not going to return anything. It's just going to do some stuff. It doesn't need any parameters because it's only going to use the fields. So if we go to the project description, you can see that there's no sample output given. So this is really up to us how we want to format that. We need the stock symbol and the current and previous closing prices. I would say something like system out print stock symbol with a space at the end, or a colon. And then let's print the previous close. And this is a money field, so I'm actually going to do a printf here so that I can print this with 2 decimal points. And I'll put a space here at the end. And then I'll do another printf that says, oops, this should be closing price. And then this will say previous, whatever that previous value is. And I'll do a print line to go to the new line. And let's take a look and see how that works. So if I go to my project driver here and run it, you can see here's my data. And I think that looks pretty good. One other thing I could do to clean the output up a little bit, if I add a number here, let's say we'll make that number 7. Now when I print, notice it puts these in a really nice line. It right justifies them in a 7-column width. If the stock goes over 10,000, this won't work, but up to 1,000 it will. And if the stock goes up to 10,000, then we can just assume that I have enough money to hire programmers to fix this for me. So there's our print method, and that looks good. So then the next part that we want to work out with is the get company and the marketCap methods. Get company is just a getter. So I'll clean up those comments. MarketCap was my next one. And that returns the market cap of the company. Suppose you don't know what a market cap is. Well, the project tells you it's the closing price. So I'm going to search for company or company name, and I'm going to change that to company. And then this needs to be just get company. So that was something where I definitely made a mistake that was not worth making. Okay, so now it looks like we still have errors. Get company. No, that's good. And so market cap, it says, is returning a void. I thought we changed that to a double, but I must have undone that. So now let's try this. And it does run. And you can see here that I print out the company's name using get company. And then I also do the market cap. Now notice this is a mess. However, this is not our mess. We're working on the class. The formatting for this is definitely not ideal. However, that's because we gave the client the market cap and they didn't know how to format a floating point number. So in this case, it's not our responsibility to fix this. This is up to the user of our class to understand that we're returning a double. And so it's up to you to determine if you want to print that out, how do you want to print that out? And the reason is because we don't know whether they want to print out that or not. And so we want to make sure we keep that double. At that point, once we return that, it's out of our hands how this display goes. So hopefully that makes sense. The difference I'm talking about, it's up to this code right here in the driver to format it. It's not up to the stock class. The stock class has done what it's supposed to do. Moving on, now we're going to need to have the buy method. So let's go to our stock class. And the buy method takes a price as a parameter and returns true if the price is under the given price. So that means it's going to be a Boolean, and the price is going to be a double, we're going to return true if price is under the given price and false otherwise. So we're going to return by less than closing price. And it's not by less than, it's in. In is the parameter we're looking for. So we'll call this the target price. And let's see if we did this right. If the price is under the given price, so this is the price that's given. And so we're going to return, if the target price is higher than the closing price, we're going to return true. Otherwise, we're going to return false. Now you may say, where do we turn true or false? Well, the result of this expression is either true or false. And so that's what this evaluates to. So it's going to return true or false based on just that. So it's sort of a shortcut with this kind of expression. And it looks like my error went away. And so you can see that we have some directions on what to buy and hold. So our last method we need to run is result. That displays the change in the stock price over time. So result will be a little bit different because we need the message stating whether the stock was up or down. Result is just going to print some stuff. So we're going to have a void method. And if the closing price is greater than the previous closing price, then I'm going to print it's up. And then how much is it up? Well, it's up closing price minus previous closing price. And then otherwise, I'll copy that line, but we're going to be down the previous closing price minus the closing price. So that way we'll always have, whichever one is higher, we're going to get a positive number, whether it's up or down. So I could just have done one statement here, I guess, and said change, and then figured out if it was up or down. But here, I'm going to say it's up or down, and then I'll print how much it's up or down by. So when I run this, did I not comment? I didn't uncomment that code out. It doesn't like result. Result is undefined for stock because I misspelled it. So that's done. And then now, do I have any other issues? I have a stray bad comment. So now when I run this, it looks like I have how much it's up or down. I think a good idea here would be maybe to think about how I could format this. It really doesn't matter necessarily as far as the value, but since this is a display method, I probably want to have it clean. So again, if it's just a value, don't clean it up. But if it's a display method, then you may want to clean that up. So I'm going to add a currency formatter. So this will give me a money formatter, and then I'm going to change this to get a double, which I need to spell double right. And so then instead of printing this difference, I'm going to print money format, and then I'll format whatever that diff is. And so now when I run, you can see that I get a much nicer result, but I didn't make the change in both cases. Need to get rid of that parentheses, and I think that's better. So now for both of these, I first calculated the value and then formatted it. I don't really need this variable, but without this variable, I would have to put the arithmetic here, and the line gets kind of big, and so it looks nicer, but that's really it. So now you can see that all of those are nicely formatted. And also you'll notice we formatted these in two different ways. Here we actually used a currency formatter to format our double as money. In our print method, we used a printf. Which way is better? Doesn't matter, they both work. And so really it's just up to you as the programmer to decide which way you prefer. Let's take a look at our stock class requirements again. We have those fields, we have those methods, so I think we can say that we're done here. And I don't think we really need these comments anymore. So there's some things that we didn't do for this particular class. For example, there's no toString method. The next project where you're working with a bank account, a lot of the same concepts will be in play where we're doing the same kind of things as far as like your fields, your methods, your constructor. You'll also add a toString and do a few more overloaded methods in that. In fact, I don't think an overloaded method was required for this project, but you can see that I have one here. So that's a quick review of project 12 where we created a class.